Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Bava Kama Daf Mem. Begin 11 lines down at the top of the Amud, where the Gemara continues explaining the halacha of apotropos. We were discussing in the previous Daf, which related to the halacha of a shiur, of a cher, a shayt v'katan, regarding if we appoint an apotropos, a caretaker for their shiur. The question was regarding a tam, is there liability, and regarding making the shiur into a mud. So the Gemara continues on this halacha regarding the responsibility of the apotropos and regarding certain liabilities specifically as relates to when there is an apotropos. Should be discussed for bnei Yisrael and Yisrael throughout the entire world. Something discussed in today's daf are apotroposim, ein mishal kaifer, that there's no halacha of the kaifer, which is when the ox kills a person, that there's no liability when there's a caretaker. And that relates to the discussion regarding kufr kapar. What is kaifer? Is kaifer a monetary liability or is it an atonement? And the orphans are not bar mitzvah, they're not those that have responsibility to require an atonement. The machlek is Rabban and Rabbi Shmuel, whether the kaifer amount is assessed according to the demei nizik or the demei mazik. Whose atonement, whose value are you atoning for? The victims that's dead or the mazik? And the Gemara relates that to this machlekes if kufr is mamayno or if kufr is kapara. The halacha of shalom b'cheskes tam menimtza mud. What happens if someone borrowed an ox in the presumption that it's a tam, but turns out to be a mud regarding the liability of the shayil in regards to that he didn't know that it was going to be a mud. And also who would be shayil v'chzir l'bayil? What happens if it becomes a mud by the borrower? While it was in his possession, it gored 3 times. And now you give it back to the owner. Does the status stay the same or does it change? Which relates to the concept of Rishus Mishana regarding when you change domains, then it goes back to being a tam. The halach of Sharit Stadin in the Chavmisa, like we said in the Mishnah, that if an ox is trained to gore, then it's not liable for death. And the question the Gemara ends off with is Malig Mizbeach. What's the halacha regarding the Mizbeach? Do we also say over there that it's going to have the same halacha of Sharit Stadin in Nizak and it's not chayiv, means not going to be possible, or would we say that no, ultimately it's possible with the Mizbeach? So begin the current Daf Mem, we begin 11 lines down for the top of the Amud, where the Gemara introduces Tanaban Abraisa. Apotroposim, Mishalmim Min Haliyah. They pay the damage from their bank account, and the Ein Mishalmin Kaifer. And they don't pay Kaifer where the ox killed a person, generally this kaifer, the apotropos, so they're going to pay from their bank account. They're going to pay from the ali, which we already discussed on the previous stuff. Which aliyah we're talking about? Was it aliyas yisaimim? Was it aliyas from the apotropos? But be that as it may, they don't pay kaifer. So says the Gemara, man tana kufr kapara. Who is the tana of this brisa that's obviously telling us that kaifer is atonement? And if it's atonement, so now we could understand orphans are not those who require atonement. So therefore, when there's a caretaker, which means that there's the assignment, so therefore there's not going to be a liability of kapara. Who is that Tana? Rav Chizdi says, because the Tana learned the Brayse, it's a machlekes regarding how much is the monetary payment for kaifer. Because there's a machlekes how you translate the pasuk in Shemais. The pasuk says that v'nasan pidyon nafsha. It says in kaifer yushas love. If there's going to be a responsibility of kaifer on the, meaning if the victim was killed by this guy's ox, so it says he gives the redemption of his life. So whose life are we talking about? So the Tanakhama says the main nizik. You have to pay for the atonement. You have to atone for the death of the life of the victim. Shmuel ben Noisha b'Yechim and Bereikoim. He says no, the main mazik. Says the monetary value of the mazik. So it says the Gemara, my love, isn't this regarding what they're disagreeing about? The abundance Sarvi, the Tanakhama held kufr mamaynahu, that atonement money is a monetary liability, which is the value of the victim. That's the monetary liability, that's the damage that you cause, and therefore it's the value of the victim. No, kufr kapara. Kaifer is atonement, which is the value of the mazik. He has to atone for his own life. So seemingly the Tana of the Brisa that's telling you that by Yisaimim, the apotropos doesn't have to pay kaifer, is because kapara, it's for atonement, which is only if you're bar mitzvah. You don't have any atonement if you're under that. And therefore, you can be exempt. Amar Papi says, "Loy, not necessarily. It doesn't have to be dependent on the machlekes. We could actually say that the kuli al mekufir kaparu. Everyone, even the one who holds it's demei mazik, the demei nizik, could also hold that kaifer is an atonement. So what are they disagreeing about? If it's not about if kufcha is mamaynu or if it's kapara, it's like this. Rabbanan Sarbe, they hold b'denizik sheminan. It's in the body of the victim that we evaluate, and that's how the mazik gets atonement, is by paying the victim's value. We evaluate with the mazik. Now, says Gemara, my time of the Rabbanan. What's the reason of the Rabbanan? Because in a way, Rabbi Shmuel makes sense that you should evaluate if kaifer is a kapara, it's your own soul that has to have atonement. Why are you evaluating with the demei of the nizik? So now it says the Gemara because we learn that from Gzeira Shava. Nemrashi Salamata, it says the word yushas, which is later on when it talks about the Shur Hamud that kills, it says Kaifer yushas alav. V'nemrashi Salamala, it says regarding the demei vladis, when you have two guys fighting and the pregnant woman gets injured in the collateral damage. So it says regarding the loss of the fetus, it says kasha yushas alav bala isha. So it says by both in this inward of shisa, malhal, just like over there by the woman who miscarried, that the evaluation is bidenizik, so you're paying for the value of the miscarriage of the fetuses. So it's the nizik. Avkan also over here when it says by kaifer yushas, it's bidenizik. It's going to be by the victim, and therefore Rabbanan learn it's the demei of the nizik. Shmuel b'noi Rabbi Yochanan ben Bereker Saba he holds no the nasan pidyon nafshik. It says he gives the redemption of his life. It's the same personality. It's the mazik's damim that is being paid for kaifer. Rabbanan, they would tell you you're right, pidyon nafshik siv, it does say the redemption of his life. But miu, however, kishaiminan, but when you evaluate that he should give the redemption of his own life, is b'denizik sheminan. Yes, you're going to get a kapara for your own life when you're the mazik, but whose value are you going to give? It's going to give the niziks like we learned the Gzeira Shava of shisa and shisa. So again, that's their machlekes, but it doesn't have to be that it's only Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Bereker is the Tana of this price. It could go even like the Rabbanon. Both of them could hold kufr as kapara, and again, therefore, orphans when there's apotropos will not be given kaiver. Now the Gemara brings that b'shabech le'Rava le'Rav Nachman. Rava praised to Rav Nachman, but did Rav Acha bar Yaakov. So Rav was telling Rav Nachman how great Rav Acha bar Yaakov is. That he's a great person. So Rav Nachman said to Rava, he says, okay, when he comes to you, they bring him to me. I want to see this great person. Because like when he came to him, Rav Nachman said to him, Boy Minei Milsa, Freg me Akasha, ask me something. So Boy Minei, so this Rav Acha bar Yaakov asked him the following question. If you have an ox of two partners, Ketzad Mishama Kaifer, how do they pay Kaifer? So Rashi explains what the Gemara's question is. You understand by damages, you say, okay, he pays Chatzi Nezik and he pays Chatzi Nezik, because the damage of the victim is what the Torah is particular about, and he has to get the full damages. Fine, they'll split it 50-50. But Kufcha Kaifer is the atonement of the Mazik. Now, they both need atonement. Now, you can't get atonement with half of a Kaifer. So the Gemara explains what the question is. On the one hand, you say, okay, Misham Hai Kaifer, you say he'll pay Kaifer and he'll pay Kaifer, but Kaifer Echad Merachman, the B'lishne Kaifer, the Torah says there's only one atonement, not two atonements. This victim's getting double the amount over here. And if you're going to say Hai Chatzi Kaifer, he'll give half and he'll give half, but Kaifer Shalom Merachman, the B'lishne Kaifer, the Torah tells you give a full Kaifer and not a half. So therefore, how do we figure this out? It can't be double, it can't be half. So the Yosef become Ainba. So while he was sitting and he was looking into this, Amalei, he said to him, Tznan, it's a Mishnah Erechin. Mishnah says, Chive Erechin, someone that took an Erech vow. So he owes a certain amount where every single person, based on age and gender, has some value. So he owes this to Hektish. The halach is Memashkin in Aisai. We take collateral from this person's security from him, the treasure of Hektish. Why? Because since it's not for atonement, the stamaneder that you took for Hektish, people will delay. You owe some money to the shul on Simchas Torah. You took a big aliyah. It takes a half a year, maybe 2 years till you pay it up. It's not a grisa kapar. But if someone did a sin and he's a guilt offering, he's a sin offering, then name him Ashkin and Aisan. Then we don't take security, because since it's for his atoning of his sins, no one delays for the sins to be owed. That ticket you pay up quicker because of it. So al kaponim. Therefore, that's the difference between these two types. Now, chiv kaifin maya. What's the halacha with? However, if someone owes kaifer, what's the question? Do you say that kivin the kaparuhu, since it's atonement, so kachatz v'ashim dami? So you would say that it's like a sin offering and a guilt offering. So the person is stringent on himself, and you don't have to go ahead and take security. Maybe no. Since he has to give it to his friend, it's like money. It's not going to Hashem, and if it's not stringent on him, and if you have to take security. Or inami, you could say, he didn't sin. It's his money that damaged. So it's not so stringent on him. And maybe therefore you do have to take security. So those are two different studim why you might have to take security. So Malay said to him that Shavkan, leave me. Istargo bekamaisa. I'm still locked up and I'm still quiet from the first question that you asked me. So basically he had asked him one question from the halacha, what do you do with kaifa by two partners? And then he said, according to the Mishnah in Erechin, he asked him another question. He wanted to know this halacha of something's being mamashkin and something's not. He wanted to know, what would you say regarding the halacha of kaifer? So he had a few kashas, learned the sugi of kaifer, it still sounds like, and he asked him one question and he didn't answer him. While he was looking into it, he asked him nachash, he says, for now, I'm still stuck in the first one. I don't know the Gemara doesn't answer the question regarding what do you do with two shutfin and what do you do with mimashkin. You say it's on the one hand it's kapara, so you wouldn't be mashkin. You'd say no, it's for someone else, or that he didn't do a sin, it was his money, so maybe it would be mashkin. The Gemara doesn't answer those two questions. Now the Gemara brings, which relate back to what we mentioned to the Machlekes in Mishnah. Remember we started about the Gemara. We learned in the Brisa. What happens like this? Shaloi becheskes tam. Someone borrowed an animal with the presumption that it was an innocent ox. But v'nim tzemuit. One of these horror stories, he borrows his ox. Turns out he didn't know what he was in for. And turns out it's a shur hamuid. Okay. And then he's trying to hold on to this ox and it damages. So the halach is like this. The owner will pay half the damages. And the borrower will pay the other half of the damages. Why? Because the Rashi explains, ultimately, the shmira of a tam, he did accept upon himself, which is chatzin nezik. However, the owner, since he didn't tell him that it's a muid, they're responsible for the other half. What? Well, it's not really mekach. I mean, whatever it's borrowing, it's not. You didn't really. You're getting to give it back. The only shayla is what I think you might be asking. No, it was a shayl. Yeah, a borrow. You go to your neighbor. You say, "Can I borrow this bike?" And the bike had no. I'm saying the only question might be is that he shouldn't even maybe he even have to pay half.
It's a higher risk.
Right.
It's a higher risk. It's not that they just pay half.
Right.
It's really a higher risk.
Right. Right. That would be the question that.
It's a higher risk that he's going to do.
No, but he's a Tom. He doesn't know he's a
Right.
He didn't know he was a Mu'ed.
No, he didn't know. He wants to know why would he even pay. The Rashi is saying the reason why the shayl pays for half is because half you would have been responsible for any shayl. So dos batzolte. A mu'ed you didn't know, so the other half you don't have to. But the question that we're going to see is that why are you even paying for that first half? It's a mu'ed. That's something that's more difficult to watch. But that's what the Brisa says, that you took responsibility, the other half the owner's going to have to pay. Now, what happens if, let's say, huid the base shayl? Let's say it was a shartam, but then the borrower, as oftentimes these borrowers, they're not so careful with the owner's stuff, and it's damaged a few times while he had it. Now it became a mu'ed. Then it went and it was returned to the owner, and then by the owner it damaged again. Now already has the characteristic already. Who knows? It damaged by the owner. So Allah is like this: the owner pays half the damage, but the borrower, so again, the owner doesn't have to pay the full damage, even though it already became a shayr mu'ed by the shoyel, and the other half the borrower does not have to pay for, which the Gemara later is going to explain that really it's because rishus mishana. The truth is, it's not a mood anymore. When it went from the borrower back to the owner, it actually went back to being a tam. So that's why the owner only has to pay chatzi and the borrower doesn't have to pay any other half. But the Gemara will ask that the ratio seems to contradict the sefer when it goes from the owner to the shayel, because you said then it is a mood, versus when it goes from the shayel back to the owner. I mean, who?
Going according to the shore, not to the wherever it stays.
Oh, right. So but it sounds like that we brought up in the other daf that for Hud Biva Olav, it sounds like that some way when it's under whose ownership, that whose company you're working for. Sometimes you act differently. So it sounds like that even the Shvarim have this. They know who's the owner that they're working for. Something like that makes sense on some level. Amamar. So the Gemara explains now. The Brayso is like this. Shali b'cheskes tam v'nimtza muad. If you borrowed it with a presumption that it was a tam, turns out that it's a muad. So the halach is like this. So ba'al misham chazin, the owner has to pay for half the damages because the borrower didn't know. But misham chazin nezik, the borrower will pay half the damages. Frek the Gemara, the question that everyone's asking, why? V'mai leima leila, the borrower tell the owner, tu'ucha sheili, I borrowed an ox, adiyale sheili, a lion I didn't borrow, meaning I didn't accept this wild animal, this lion to watch. Had it been a shir tam, it wouldn't have gored in the first place. So I shouldn't be chayiv even on the chatzi nezik. Some Rabbi says, what are we talking about over here? No, he recognized that this is a goring type of an animal. So Rashi explains, he didn't know it gored 3 times, so which would be for the monetary liability. So therefore, a shmira of a tam that is nagach, he did accept. So he should have protected. So he knew it's going to gore. He knew he was up for a fight. So he would have to pay chatz and nezik. He just didn't know, but monetarily that would be mood of nezik shalom. But the Gemara says, that still doesn't make sense. The name should tell him, tam she'ili, mood le she'ili. It didn't become, what's the reason why mood pays nezik shalom? Because you know that this is its characteristic. A tam, even if it gores, it's still not its characteristic. So I still borrowed, I thought it was borrowing a tam. I didn't think it was borrowing a mood. So I shouldn't be chayiv anything because it's not a lion. I knew that I was getting into something, but I didn't know I was getting into that. So it says some mood lo she'ili. Says the Gemara, no, Misham Damalei, you could tell him safe at the end of the day. Itam have, if it would have been a tam, Pal Ganiska boys Shluma, you would have to pay chatz and ezik. Hashanam is Shlim Pal Ganiska. So now also you have to pay half the damages. The Gemara understands that to mean that no, that's not a good taina. That because ultimately you knew it was going to gore and you knew you're going to get into this responsibility. But then says the Gemara, okay, but itam it's a tam, megufay. Then it would only be collectible from the body of the animal itself. And what? So there's 2 different gesois in Rashi. Either means and not from me, or not from my bank account, but it would be limited to megufay. So says the Gemara, but mishum damalei, you could tell him, say at the end of the day. Who cares? What are you telling to the owner that you're saying, hey, I didn't know it was a mood. I thought it was a tam, and tam would be collectible from the body of the shar. Okay, so let's say they collect from the body of the shar. Even though it's my shar, you would have to pay me back. You're a shayel. You chayiv an einzin even. You chayiv for everything. You would have to pay me back. So who cares? So says the Gemara, whoa, but name let him tell him as you can see in Tamid Beis, im tam hava. But if it would be a tam, you're right. The fact that it's megufa wouldn't make a difference. But meidina umafterina, I could have admitted and been let off the hook because we know chatzi nezik is knas, and the halach is moed b'knas is potter, like the Gemara tells later on the ayin daled. So I could have admitted I would have been off the hook if it would have been just a tam. Now says the Gemara, even if we're the one who holds chatzi nezik is monetary halach, it's not knas. You can't just admit and get off the hook. But namely, he could still tell him, itamahu, if it would have been a tam like I thought I was borrowing, have marikna leila agma. So I would have gone and I would have taken it off to a swamp where it wouldn't have been collected. It wouldn't have been a loss for us because it could only collect the migufay. If I could hide it, which Tracy discusses about what type of claim is this? What he could do shaleik din? What does that mean? What's he trying to say? So he says no. That he says I could have done some type of tactics that the victim would have made like a pshar with me very easily. He'd been Michael, and he could have found he's not going to do shaleik din, but he would have been able to get him in a compromised situation that they come to some. He could have gotten it cheap upon him. But now that it's a muad, they could collect my bank accounts. It's not going to help me to take the ox to the swamp. So that should be a taina that he should say, I don't want to have to pay even chatzin nezik because of this reason. Tzela says, no, it's not a good claim to say that I would have taken it away to the swamp because the courts repossessed the shur, and therefore that couldn't have been a claim that I could have hidden the ox. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, then why do the owners pay the other half of the damages? Namely, why didn't they tell the borrower, you had my ox possessed, biyada in the hands of mandula metina lishtu'udina that I cannot fight with, which is bezdin. So that's your fault. You should have gone and gotten my ox hidden away somewhere, and then we wouldn't have had any loss because only gufay. It's your fault. So, to the contrary, the Gemara was originally asking that the shiur should be able to get off the hook. That I didn't know I was getting myself into this. The Gemara is now asking the other way around, saying, "Wait a second, the owner should get off the hook and say it's your fault, Mr. Shiur. You should pay everything because if you would have been more careful, this ox wouldn't have been. In other words, had it been a tam that he says." Because the Shiur says to him, had I given it back to you, would they not have collected it from you? So, but maybe they could tell him, no, you had just in Ale. So the owner could say, had you given it back to me, I would have taken it to the swamp. So he says, no, he could tell him, at the end of the day, so he says, but we're not talking about a time, we're talking about that it's a muad. So anyways, would they have not have collected from your bank account? In other words, the Gemara up until now was making like it didn't know what we're talking about. We're talking about a shor hamuad, which is, anyways. So what you have to understand what the Gemara's happening was, but the Gemara is saying, well, what I mean, you're right. It's your fault. Why didn't you hide it away? They repossessed it. You made us have the loss. So he says, no. At the end of the day, they would have collected from your banks anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. But says Gemara, it's not true. That's only where the mazik has assets. Where he doesn't have assets. Michael, remember, what are you going to say? All he has is the shur. So we're back to the question. No, it's true. The mazik should not have to pay because the only collectible he had was the shur, and it was your fault that they took the shur. You would have hidden it. They wouldn't have gotten anything. So that says the Gemara, because the bar could tell him, it's not true. Just like I am responsible to you, I'm also responsible to the victim. And actually, it's not my negligence that they collected it. It's actually my lawful responsibility that I give it to the victim. Why? I mean, the Reb Nosson, this is the famous what's called Shibud Reb Nosson, that the lien of Reb Nosson, which Reb Nosson taught us the Tanya in the Brayso. Reb Nosson says, how do we know if someone is a creditor, he's owed 100 dinarim by one person? Now that person that owes him is owed 100 dinarim to him. How do you know that if Reuven owes Shimon and Shimon owes Levi, that Levi goes straight to Reuven to collect? Because the post teacher by Midbrit says that you give it to the one that the guilt is to him, that what you owe means to say you don't have to go to the one that you owe, you go to the one that is ultimately owed, which is the original guy, and therefore that's why it's not a taina against the shayil that he let the courts take it. Actually, it's his responsibility of Shibud Reb Nosson to give it to that person. So again, therefore, that's why we end up that the owner will be paying half, because ultimately the borrower didn't know about this mood status, so that's his fault. That's the owner's fault. But regarding the chatzin nezik, so that we said that al kapanim you took responsibility. You knew it was a nagkin, you didn't know it was a mood. That's regarding the monetary purpose, but he'll pay the chatzin nezik. Now the next halacha we said was, who would be beis shayil? If, let's say, when the borrower, it was a regular tam, and then in the shayil's jurisdiction, the shayil became a muad, and after Vichziru L'Bailim, they give it back to the owner, and then it gored another shiur when it was backed by the owner. So we said Bailim Misham Chatzin Nesek. The owner pays half the damages. V'shal Patim Klum, and the borrower, he has no liability here whatsoever. So that says the Gemara. Wait a second. Seifa is obviously telling us, because it doesn't make sense. The shiur should be responsible for the other half, just like the mazik was. So obviously, no rishus mishana. The reason why there's no liability because there's only a chiyuv of chatzin nezik. Because when it changed the jurisdiction from the borrower to the lender, it was a reset, and it's back to being a shiur tam. So therefore, there's only chatzin nezik, and that's going to be the owner's liability. But reisha the rishus ain't mishana, and this is the contradiction that we alluded to earlier. That wait a second, the reisha said that when there was a mu'id by the owner's possession, and then it's borrowed by the borrower and the damages over there, that going is going to be a chiv of nezik shalom. And we said, okay, he didn't know, so he'll pay half. But wait a second, what do you mean half and half? There's no nezik shalom. There's only chatzin nezik. Because you told me when it goes between the lender and the borrower, it's a change of dominion, and then you said that it's a reset. So why is there a nezik shalom when it went from the owner to the borrower? So Rabbi Yochanan, he says, Tavra says, you're right, it's broken, it's a difficulty. Misha shanazu le'shanazu. The one that taught the Reisha didn't teach the Seifa. You're right. It's a contradiction if Rishus is Mashana or not. That's one approach. However, the Gemara has two more approaches. Rabbi Amai says no. The fact that the first halach is Rishus in Mashana, like we said, obviously it's not changing when they went from the lender to the borrower because there's still Chiv Nezik Shalom. Seifa Nam Rishus is Mashana. Seifa is also Rishus is Mashana. The question is, wait a second. So the Seifa in the time, so what's the reason why by the Seifa when it goes from the borrower to the lender? Is there going to be a reset? I thought Rishus not Mashana. Why is there going back to being a tam? From the Amalek, because the owner can tell the borrower, you have no rights to make my ox into a mu'ud. I mean, it's not yours. So you weren't careful watching it. So you have to understand, we're on the lumdis about what makes a shiur hamu'ud. Like we always say, is it prescriptive or descriptive? Is it simon or the siba? What is this taina? But that's what he's saying. It's not yours. You can't change the status of my ox from a tam to a mu'id, and therefore that's why when it goes back, which is interesting also, the shaila is when it was by the shayl, seemingly then it would l'chayra have a halacha of a shiur hamu'id, when it was recorded 3 times by him. But when it goes back to the owner, no, then it's back to a tam because you can't change the status of my animal. Again, you have to understand, it sounds like the ownership, or it plays somewhat of a role in the creation of the shiur hamu'id. That's one mahalach. Another approach, the other way around, Rav Papa says no. But the say from the fact that the second halacha is rishus mishan, like we said, because obviously it's going from the borrower back to the lender, it's a reset. So rishus mishana. The opening halacha is also a reset. In other words, it's one tana, and the tana the reisha also holds of the seifa the rishus mishana. So then the question of the reisha and the taima. So what's the reason by the halacha the reisha? Why are we saying it remains with its chazaka b'muid? Why I thought when it goes between the lender and the borrower, that's different rishuyos. Why is there nezik shalom? Because there is no shina rishus. It's not to change the dominion. Because anywhere where the owner's animal goes, shame ba'alav alav. It's yenems. It's the name of his owner, and therefore that's not considered change. When you're going from the borrower to the lender, for some reason that sounds like the Gemara is saying that is. Because right, exactly. Never left. Exactly. How does it go back and start over? At least according to this, the previous answer had said lav kol kamina, so that could actually go well with this to say you have no rights. But you are telling me that it is mishana. You are telling me that when the seifa when it's going back, it's changing obviously. So it did change. So yeah. So the shaila is what's happening from the borrower from Barakapana, whatever borrower status. No, the reason why is like we said because the borrower made it into a mu'id. So that status that the borrower made, that's a shina, that's a rishus mishana, going back to the original owner. It's like it's a change. But from the owner to the shayl, that's not considered as a change. It's going to hold on to the status of the mood that it had by the owner. Now the Mishnah told us that shayr stadin, that if an ox was trained to gore with the gladiators, that they kill them, so then the ox is not put to death. Because the pasuk says ki yigach shorish, which is if he gores, not if the ox is incited to gore. Now I boiled the following question: what's the halacha regarding if this ox willingly gored and killed a person? So that halacha is pasha, as the Gemara is going to tell us later on, that the ox is possible for a carbon. What's the halacha if it's a shayrid stadin? It was the ox from the amphitheater that it was trained. They came and they conquered the Romans, and the Jewish people come. They take this animal. They want to bring it as a carbon. Oidul Hashem, carbon taida. They bring this ox. Sashar nagchen. This ox that it's a shayrid stadin, can you bring it to the mizbeach or not? So it's machlekes. Rav Amakasha, he says, yeah, you can take this animal from the gladiators over here, bring it back to Yerushalayim. Next comic book that comes out, you have this, the Jews come with the little boy, he saves the day, and he takes the ox back with him, and he brings it back, and he brings it as a carbon. Shmuel Amakasha says, no, it's going to be possible, you can't bring this as a carbon. So the Gemara explains the machlekes. Rav Amakasha says, Anusu, this animal was forced, it was coerced. So it's not considered as a psul, because it was forced to do that, and therefore it's kosher to be brought as a carbon. Shmuel Amakasha says, no pasul. Ultimately, a sin was done with it. Ultimately, it killed a person, and a sin done through an animal is going to invalidate it from being brought as a carbon. Now, Meisvi, the Gemara asks on Shmuel from the following brisa. The pasuk says that you should speak to the Jewish people. You should tell them if a person is going to sacrifice from you a carbon for Hashem. So it says many different terminologies, which the Gemara in many places in Shas darshans these extra words that when it says from, or this, s, it's coming to exclude other things. It says min ha-behema, from the animal. Well, what's min ha-behema? Just say behema. Min is from, which is exclusionary terminology, saying only from some of the animals, not all of them. Oh, what's that coming to exclude? It's coming to exclude if, which Rashi explains specifically, that we're talking about where there was one witness or the owner admitted to it. Because if there was two witnesses, then the animal would be stoned. It wouldn't be negated to be brought as a carbon. Saying the animal's not being stoned because there was only one witness who said that this animal was sodomized or sodomized a woman. So it's possible for the mizbeach. That's what the pasuk is teaching me from min ha-behema. When it says min ha-bakar, from the cattle, again it's from, excluding. Leitzis hanevad, it's coming to exclude if they made this animal into an avodah zarah and they bowed down to it. Salami baloni. This animal is going to be possible. They brought it as a carbon. When it says min hatzain, from the flock, again, from, as Lahitzis Amuktzah is coming to exclude, if it was set aside and designated to be sacrificed for avodah zarah, that already disqualifies it. Now, that's min hatzain, but it doesn't say min hatzain. Actually, it says min hatzain, and is an extra letter. That's Lahitzis Anoigeach, that comes to exclude if this ox gored and killed a person, which obviously with one witness testifying or with the owner admitting, which again, the animal is not going to be stoned to death then, that animal is going to be possible to be brought as a carbon. Now, Amr B'Shimon, the Brisa continues, and B'Shimon says like this, if it says that the animal is sodomized, that engaged in carnal act with a human being, that it's possible, why does it have to say the sin of shvichas damim? It already spoke about gila rais. And if it say an animal that engaged in spilling blood, why does it talk about that when it's sodomized? In other words, they're both the same. They're both one of the three cardinal sins regarding if the animal gets stoned when there's witnesses. Animal gets stoned to death if it was engaged in bestiality with a human being, and the animal gets stoned to death if it killed a person if there would be witnesses. So those are two same type of sins. Why do you need to say them both as excluding them from being a carbon? Says Reb Shimon, because each one has a quality that the other one doesn't have, and maybe you would think that one would be kosher, as he explains. By Raiva, asa by Einis Kiratzen. When the animal sodomized, which Tais actually discusses that, Rashi makes it sound like that the nirva, the animal that was sodomized, let's say by a man, that's onus. So it was forced. And it still gets stoned to death, because it says Bahima Taregu. Tais actually goes literally, because Roiva actually is not nirva. Rashi is a little bit of a deichik. Rashi saying that by Roiva it means the nirva, which obviously is beyond the animal's control. Some human being comes and engages in bestiality with the animal, even though it's ba'inus, so we're saying it's karatzen, but Taisa says, wait, how could you have Roiva, which is the male version, not the female version, the male version, how could you have Einis karatzin, but we know the Gemara tells us in Yavamas that in kisha el ladas, the erection is only possible when you have intention. So how could you say it was ba'inus? Obviously, the animal did it intentionally. So Taisa says, no, it's where it got an erection for its own type, and then the woman brought the animal on her. So it ended up being an oinus. Akapanim, either way, the liability of Reva is even this ba'inus. But by animal that gores and kills a person, that they didn't make when you did it ba'inus like a ratzin, because that's the halacha of our Mishnah that we said. It says ki'igach. It's only when it gores, and not when they cause it to gore. And so to the other way around. So again, that's a stringency that Reva has over Noigeach, and Noigeach has a stringency over Reva because Noigeach misham kaifer. When the animal gores and kills a person, you have to pay atonement money. Reva ain't misham as a kaifer. When it sodomizes, so then there's no liability of kaifer, which Gemara later is going to explain what kaifer. No person was killed over here. So that's not really a stringency of Negeach over Reveya, but Al Kapanim, each one has a stringency. You have to say that both of them are excluded of being valid as a carbon when it's sodomized or when it gores. Okay, that's the end of the Brisa. But what does our Gemara want from this? What's the question on Shmuel? Yes, but one thing the Brisa told us that we said, remember, what's these psukim talking about over here? This Brisa is talking about the Allah of a carbon. Saying you could bring your carbon, carbon, now, those are exclusions because it's min. Now, what are we saying? That Raiva Asabain is karatzin. We told you that what's not valid as a carbon, animal that sodomizes. So we would have thought, because it's very stringent, because even when it does ba'in, this is like ratzin. And negeach, you said, why you have to say negeach? Because you would have thought it would not be excluded. We ultimately excluded. You would have thought it's not excluded. Why? Because like Asabain is karatzin. We don't make when it's forced to gore as when it does it willingly. Wait a second, Lamai Helchasa. For what halacha are you telling me that we don't make Einis Karatzin? Lav carbon? Isn't it regarding carbon? Because that's the context of the pasuk that we're discussing over here. That we say it is kosher. That's not like Shmuel. We had this machlekes Rav and Shmuel regarding Malagab Mizbeach of the Sharet Stadin that was forced to gore. Shmuel said that it's going to be puzzle. Here we see clearly that Einis, which is the Sharet Stadin, is kosher for a carbon. Says no, it's not the context. It's like tala. It's regarding being killed. In other words, meaning by killing. In other words, what the Brisa was saying was that when the ox gores, we didn't make einis karatzin regarding being stoned when there are witnesses, like we said in the Mishnah. So therefore, what Rabbi Shimon was saying was, if the pasuk would not have excluded the halacha of negeach regarding carbon, I would not have known it from Reveya, where even when you do it willingly, that to make it possible, I would not have known, because you're right. When you do it, when you do it ba'inus, then actually it could be possible, but you could say that it's more kal from Reveya regarding the halacha of being killed, but not regarding carbon. Meaning it's not a stira on Shmuel. Could be that it is possible. Are you saying that you didn't make it in this karatzin? That's regarding being killed. I didn't make einis karatzin. By Reveya, even when it's ba'inus, you will kill it. Here you will not kill it, but not regarding the halacha of carbon. Regarding the halacha of carbon, it could be einis is like ratzin, and it is possible because the Ma'aseh never did by Aveira. It's not valid to be brought for Hashem. This they were saying that we're making this differentiation is saying in the other halacha of being killed, we find that Reveya is more chamer. So therefore, regarding the halacha of carbon, I would not have known the halacha of negeach from Reveya. It's logical like this because the Amal of carbon, if you think that it's actually for the halacha of carbon, so negeach, you said the words are like asaba einis karatzin. What does the Gemara want from that? So Rashi says it sounds like that the pasuk didn't make einis like ratzin. That's how you would read it if you're saying it's going on carbon. But the question is, wait a second, from where do you learn it out that it's so obvious to you to say, the pasuk didn't make einis like ratzin. What? And your question was regarding carbon, but lav einis dedeksev, lav ratzin dedeksev. But neither one are written in the Torah. What are you saying? Telling me if you want to learn regarding carbon, you're saying, I wouldn't have known negeach from Reveya because the pasuk doesn't make oinus like Ratzin of carbon, like it does by that of Reveya, which that would have been the question on Shmuel. The Gemara says that doesn't make sense because neither one, not oinus, not Ratzin, are written regarding carbon, regarding negech. We're actually learning it out from the extra word umin. We're learning it out from somewhere. But it's never written. So what he said, obviously, el lav l'ktala. Rather, obviously, it's regarding being killed. Regarding being killed, that the pasuk does differentiate. It only makes it when you do it b'ratzin kiyigach v'leishigichu. That we have a source for it being killed. That when it does it ba'onis versus when it does it b'ratzin, and therefore it's not a difficulty on Shmuel. Could be that the halacha would be that it would be possible for the mizbeach not only b'ratzin but even ba'onis. Now, Amamah, the Gemara goes back to explain this brisa. That once we introduced it, so the Gemara just clarifies it. We said Negeach, Reb Shimon was explaining why he needed both Negeach and Reveya. Because Negeach, Mishal Masakaifer, when an animal gores and kills a person, the owner of the animal has to pay atonement. But Reveya, in Mishal Masakaifer, when the animal sodomizes the person, then you don't have to pay for the kaifer. So the Gemara says, Hey Chadami, what's the case talking about? Meaning, if his animal went and there was a girl, a 5-year-old girl, which is already Roy Labi or whatever, and he sodomized her, and he killed the girl. So Malikat Labakarna, who cares if he killed her with his horns? Malikat Labadavia, who cares if he killed him by sodomizing her? Of course you should be chayav kaifer. What do you tell me that's a chumrah of negeach over the reveya? What are you going to tell me, which would have been the simple understanding? No, he sodomized the woman, but he didn't kill her. So what do you mean? The reason why I don't pay kaifer is not a chumrah of negeach over that of reveya, because he didn't kill anyone. That's not considered as a leniency. So my Abai says no. No, he did sodomize her, but he did not kill her. But the woman who engaged in bestiality with him, she gets executed because that's is in the Torah. You're not supposed to have sodomy with an animal. So what would you say is command the cutler dummy? That's as if the ox killed the woman because she's being executed for having engaged in bestiality with him. So therefore, you would have thought to say maybe that you would kill the ox. That's what we're saying. That no, that's a chumrah of negeach, meaning for the owner to pay kaifer. They're saying no, that's only by negeach and not by reveya. Which Taisus asks, he says, "What is it? What's the negligence of the shiur? She killed herself because she brought the ox onto her. As we said before, that's the only way you got kishu ladas, and then you brought him to her. So on that says Rabbi Nachman, it's not true that the animal jumped on her to sodomize her. So then wait, why would you be killing the woman then? It's not a consensual relationship. Basically, the Gemara's understanding it's not a consensual relationship. Either she brought the animal onto her, or the animal sodomized her. So either way, it doesn't make sense. How you tell me that you would hold the ox liable, that the owner should have to pay kaifer? That's what you would have thought. That's what the Gemara is trying to clarify. And at the same time, you would say, well, he didn't kill her, so that's not a chumrah of negeach versus reveya to make it a leniency because we wouldn't kill her. No, we would kill her because she brought him on her. So manavshach, then it's not the ox negligence. How do we understand this? So on that he says that no, the ox jumped on her to sodomize her, and then she got a desire and she did it willingly. And even according to the Man Da'amar and Ksubis, that chilas b'aynis was sefer b'ratzain, that if in the beginning a woman was being raped and then she was willing, that it's permitted. That's in the beginning was a bia b'aynis, but over here the beginning of the bia was b'ratzain, and that's forbidden according to everyone. And the same thing would be therefore that she would be killed. So even though she was karka olam, she didn't do anything, but then she went and she got interested. So Al Kapam takes just be miyashav. How's it possible? What the Gemara is entertaining to say that you would have thought to say that the owner of the ox should be chayiv by reveya, that we're telling you a chiddush that he's not. That to say there's a chayiv of kaifer because the woman's ended up being killed, you have to be able to figure out those two pieces. That Taisus is explaining that the woman has liability and the ox has liability, but that's the kamash malan that not, and that's the chiddush to say that there's only kaifer by when you directly kill a woman and not when you indirectly by the court case. Rav Amma, he gives a different approach. He says, the truth is that he sodomized and he killed her. Kasha, then the question is, wait a second. Mali kala b'karnai, mali kala b'reveya. So, and the Chanami, so why is there only kaifer by negeach and not b'reveya if he killed her by sodomizing her? So and that says the Gemara, because no, Karen is different, because when you do it your horns, kavanas lahazik, his intent is to damage. Hi, kavanas lahanas asmahu. Here, his intent is for his own pleasure, and therefore that's not considered as the liability of kaifer, which is only by Karen. Says the Gemara. So, by my pligi. So, what's Abai and Rava disagreeing about with their different answers that they just gave for this question? It's something that we discussed in Daf Chavav Med Aleph. When the animal is walking innocently and it tramples a baby and it kills it in the victim's courtyard, because if we're being Rosh Hashanah, then obviously there would be no chiv of regal according to everyone, because it has to be b'stei acher, like we said in the first paragraph of Gimel Beis. But it's Rosh Hashanah, la Abaya misham kaifer. According to Abaya, the owner of the animal would have to pay kaifer money, atonement money for the death of the child, because even though the animal did not have intent to damage, but he explained the reason why you're potter over here by Reveya is because it didn't kill. But the inference of Abaya's answer would be, but if it did kill, then you would pay kaifer. So therefore, you see that it doesn't have to be specifically kavanas lahazik to be chayiv a kaifer. It could be chayiv by regal. It could be chayiv for when it was doing hanos atzmai, like Shane when it was being reveya. According to Rava, lemisham kaifer wouldn't pay kaifer because he says it has to be specifically kavanas lahazik. The Gemara says, "Tanika b'sei Rav." We have a brayso that says like Rav that we mentioned before that shiur, meaning in this machlekes with Shmuel, shiur at stadin, the ox that's trained to gore, Enechayiv Misa is not liable for that. And it's valid, not like Shmuel, Neshu Kamusik is like it was forced, and therefore it's not going to be a psul. It's a bad thing to any time hosting us.